Well, as often happens in peace negotiations, the closer you get to the goal line, the more chaos you have. It's like a football game. The last 10 yards are the hardest to pick up. The resistance is the most fierce. We know that April 29th is the deadline for the conclusion of a Middle East peace agreement. At least that was the deadline that was set back on July the 30th of 2013. So the question is, do we get an agreement at all? If we do get an agreement, what will it be? Will this merely be an extension of present talks? Now, what makes all this so important is that what I believe is the greatest prophetic fulfillment in 2,000 years is at stake here. The issues they are talking about deal with the fulfillment of a promise that there will be a peace, or I shouldn't say a promise, there's a prophecy that there will be a peace agreement in the Middle East between Palestinians and Israelis, and the Bible says this agreement will begin the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon. Now, a lot of it, with all of the discussion they were having and what we could find out, it appears they were dealing with all the necessary issues to fulfill the prophecy. So if they sign an agreement and if it includes what they hope to include in it, then that means the final 7 years to Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus to this earth would start on April the 29th. Now, if they don't conclude that agreement, then it won't begin yet. Now, the agreement is coming. The peace deal is coming, period. It's in the Bible. It's prophesied. The prophecies always come to pass. The only question is when. Will it be April the 29th or not? That's the only question. John Kerry set the date, April the 29th. It's not in the Bible. So it may happen. It may not happen. However, there are reasons to believe that it well could happen. It appears, though, that the negotiations have hit the rapids, that there are problems, there are rocks in the way, there are things that are happening. So I want to go over with you what is actually happening so that you can get at least a picture of what is going on here. This article comes from Israel National News, and it says Kerry cancels Abbas meeting as Palestinian Authority requests to join UN agencies. The Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas breached the conditions of the peace talks Tuesday by signing a request to join several United Nations UN agencies. Now, let me pause there just a moment. He is justifying doing this because there was supposed to be a fourth prisoner release on the 29th, which was last Saturday, which Netanyahu missed. Now, it appears that Netanyahu missed it because if he had released the prisoners, it would have toppled his government. Therefore, he was buying some time, apparently, until he could tend to things on the home front. Because if his government topples, then, of course, everything's back to zero because all the negotiations are taking place under the authority of the Netanyahu government. So it's a balancing act where Netanyahu has to keep his ruling coalition together. Part of it is made up of the right wing that is bitterly opposed to the peace negotiations because the peace negotiations, by very definition, are designed to give away part of the land of Israel. So they're absolutely opposed to it, and they've been looking for the right time to torpedo those talks because they don't believe in them. And they're biblically correct. God said to Israel, when I bring you into the land that I promised to your father Abraham, you are not to sign any agreements with the inhabitants of the land. You are utterly to drive them out. You are to possess the land. Well, Israel had that chance back in 1967, but through fear and through other reasons, they did not possess the land, and consequently now they're dealing with the aftermath of that faith failure. So that's where we are as of right now today. Now, the article goes on to tell us that the Palestinian leadership has unanimously approved a decision to seek membership of 15 UN agencies and international treaties, beginning with the Fourth Geneva Convention, Abbas said on television after signing the applications. The PA chief also threatened that if Israel did not release the fourth batch of 26 convicted terrorists set to be released as part of ongoing talks, the PA would immediately seek membership in another 63 agencies. Okay, now let's evaluate this for just a moment. So why does that matter to Israel? I mean, if the Palestinian Authority goes out and seeks membership in all these international agencies, what does that have to do with Israel? Well, Israel fears international government. We are deeper into world government than most people want to admit. But Israel realizes there's this one particular arm of the UN called the International Criminal Court. And the International Criminal Court, its constitution was specifically written with Israel in mind. They include in their section of war crimes any nation who invades another nation and then transfers their population into that nation, or transfers the population of the invaded nation out of their home. They are guilty of a war crime. Now, Israel's argument is that wasn't a nation. There was no nation there. However, the world community is not buying that argument, even though Israel's right. There was no Palestinian state there. This was the Palestinian territories occupied by both Israelis and Arabs prior to the 1948 war. When Israel declared independence in response to the UN resolution partitioning the land, the Arabs launched a war against Israel to destroy the nation of Israel. Jordan came across the Jordan River into the West Bank, into the area that's called Judea, Samaria, and they fought against Israel going all the way to East Jerusalem. They captured the Temple Mount. So when the ceasefire happened in 1949, Jordan controlled the West Bank and the Dome of the Rock, the Temple Mount area. Israel controlled West Jerusalem and territory over in that direction between there and the Mediterranean Sea. So when the ceasefire happened, it was Jordan that occupied. They were the occupying power at that time. And then in the 67 war, Jordan decided to jump into that war, and they began to fight against Israel. Israel counterattacked and drove them out of the West Bank and Judea, and that's when Israel took possession of it. So who did they take it from? From the occupying power of Jordan? Who did they take it from? It belonged to no state prior to that. It belonged to the Ottoman Empire back before World War I, and then it belonged to the British Mandate from 1920 to 1948. So that's where things stand right now. But Israel is concerned because the UN always votes against it. And if all the nations of the world decides to put Israel under economic sanction and refuses to trade with her, then Israel's going to have a very difficult time, especially if she cannot count on the American administration. The Obama administration makes Israel nervous. Now, Obama argues, hey, we've been better to Israel than any other administration. We've given more foreign aid. We've given more military aid. And so he argues that there's no reason for Israel to be suspicious, but still Israel is. Well, Obama didn't help any when he made his speech calling for negotiations on the basis of the 67 borders with certain land swaps. And he did that, which was not Israel's position. So he sided with the Palestinian position publicly in a speech. So he didn't win any friends or any trust from the nation of Israel at the time. So anyway, this is the setting. And when Abbas says he's going to appeal to international bodies, what that means is he knows he has a majority, a vast majority of support against Israel and for the Palestinians at the United Nations. Consequently, he says, I am going to the United Nations and I'm going to appeal there. Well, Israel knows if there's a vote at the UN, she will lose. Then it all comes down to one thing. Will the United States stand on the nation of Israel and use its veto power to prevent any military action by the UN against the nation of Israel? That's the big question. Now, we don't know the answer to that question right now. Used to, that was a given. but no more. So we don't know the answer. That's where we stand. And those are the choices facing Israel. Now, let's just say the U.S. will not help Israel. Then who will? Unless God does. Will God? Yes, he will. He will, ultimately. But a lot of troubled waters between here and there. So that's what's going on in Israel today. Let me give you a little bit more here. This article is entitled, Kerry Says Too Early to Declare Talks Dead. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry responded to Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas's announced request to join 15 international organizations on Tuesday in breach of the peace talk conditions, a move potentially torpedoing the talks. Now, the reports came in that Israel was going to go ahead and release the prisoners, but it was just going to be 3 or 4 days late. It looks like Mahmoud Abbas was only looking for an opportunity. I mean, not even 2 or 3 or 4 days grace, because it was only the 29th when it was supposed to happen, and here we are, the 1st of April. And they already said sometime this week the 26 prisoners would be released. But it was just like Abbas was waiting in the wings like a coiled spring, and as soon as he had an excuse, he went ahead and began to make application to join these international organizations. Despite Abbas's unilateral move for international recognition in breach of the peace talk conditions established last July by Kerry, the Secretary of State noted President Abbas has given me his word that he will continue to negotiate until the end of April. The talks are set to last until April the 29th. According to Kerry, it is premature to draw judgments from today's events. He added there is no agreement at this time. There are a lot of possibilities. The Israeli cabinet has to vote. Vote on what? What do they have to vote on? Well, we'll see. Speaking at a press conference in Brussels, Kerry announced that he had canceled a planned meeting with Abbas in Ramallah on Wednesday, saying, we have certain things we are trying to figure out in terms of the logistics on the ground and what is possible. Kerry added, my team is on the ground meeting with the parties even now. We urge both parties to show restraint. Kerry further claimed that none of the 15 institutions the PA asked for membership into were part of the UN. The claim contradicts Abbas, who said earlier on Tuesday the Palestinian leadership has unanimously approved a decision to seek membership of 15 UN agencies. So that's where we are today. The plot thickens.